so it'll take just a moment here and make sure I did everything right. Oh, I might not have. Let's see. One sec. Nope, I didn't. Okay, let's do it right now. Lisa Lippman, number one agent at Brown Harris Stevens. Okay. Okay, let's see if this works. Sorry, just give me one sec. I made a quick mistake, which is no big deal. Yeah, we seem to be good there. Okay, there we are. Cool. So just waiting for LinkedIn to grab it. And I'm sorry, LinkedIn, Instagram. We are live on at LinkedIn as well. Come on. All right, here we go. All right. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received as a realtor?
The best piece of advice I ever received was from a guy named Chris Peters, who was a manager at Corcoran. He was teaching new training for new brokers. It was the winter of 1998. And I asked innocently what was his advice for somebody who wanted to do this part time. And he laughed at me in front of everybody with kind of an evil laugh. And he said, if you want to do this part time, get out of the business. So that was really good advice. And remember that that was back before people were using cell phones or email. So things moved slower then. And even back then, he told me, don't try to do it part time.
Love that. What's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, I would say probably the worst advice I ever got was in that same training program. And I don't remember who gave this advice, but back then they used to sometimes teach brokers that when you worked with buyers, and back then in New York, 80% of our inventory was something called a co op. I know you guys have some of them in Chicago too. And they taught me, they said, when you meet a client, before you take them out to show them properties, find out how much money they have and how much money they make, and get all that information up front. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I can't do that when I first meet somebody, because that would be very off putting if somebody said that to me. And I don't feel comfortable doing that. So what I do, when I think about how I manage my business, and when I teach new brokers, I say you have to be true to yourself. So if something doesn't feel comfortable to you, then you're probably not going to be good at it. And I have gotten to where I was by, I guess, sometimes taking the chance and taking somebody out and showing them properties and finding out that maybe they had less money than, or didn't have enough money to buy what they were hoping to buy, or maybe they couldn't buy a co-op, maybe they had to buy a condo. I will tell you, probably net, people end up having more money than I thought they had in the first place. Most people don't want to waste their time and be embarrassed. But I would say that was pretty bad advice, I thought.
Yeah, I love that. So for those of us that haven't worked with condos, I'm assuming, Lisa, the reason why you got that advice is because people have to go in front of
Co-op
the
board.
co-op board. I'm sorry, if I
Yeah.
said condo, I meant co-op.
That's okay.
Yeah, the co-op board, and then they have a little interview, and they have to pass the sort of smell test. And it's my sister had that. She lived in the West Loop, West Loop, in the West Village for a number of years on Barrow Street, and so she had that to go through that as well, and she passed with flying colors. But it is something that is an extra step. We do have them in Chicago, not as common, obviously, as you have in Manhattan. But yeah, I love that too, because you're right. Not everybody wants to share that information up front. It's not an easy question to ask up front, and it seems like it's worked out okay for you that you haven't asked those questions up front.
Yeah.
All right, today our guest is Lisa K. Lippman. She is a nationally recognized industry leader with over 27 years of experience in real estate. Last year, she closed, get this, transactions exceeding $300 million, further solidifying her position as the number one agent at Brown Harris Stevens for the ninth consecutive year. That is a very big deal. We've had lots of Brown Harris Stevens agents on this show, but we've never had number one. So we're super excited to have Lisa on. She is known for her deep understanding of the economic factors influencing the real estate market. And Lisa is also a trusted advisor to both buyers and sellers. Follow her on Instagram, Lisa K. Lippman. That's Lippman with two P's and one N. We will have a link to that in the show notes. Lisa K. Lippman on Instagram. Lisa, welcome to Keeping It Real.
Thank you.
I am so excited to chat with you because, by the way, I was looking at your current offerings, and yes, of course, Manhattan, all the prices are a lot higher than a lot of other places, and so it's always a little bit of sticker shock to see, no matter what other market you might be in. But boy, you have a lot of really impressive properties. So I want to get into the sort of luxury world and how you've sort of built your business. And I know you don't exclusively work there. You do other types of properties, but you certainly have a lot of really high-end luxury listings. And our audience would love to hear about how they might want to think about getting into luxury. But before we get to that, I want to hear your story because you were a lawyer and you made a switch. So we don't often hear that story. So let's find out how and why did you make the transition from law into real estate?
So I made the transition sort of accidentally. I was a lawyer for 5 years, and I really enjoyed being a lawyer. I was a litigator, and I have my first child, who's going to be 31 next week. And I tried doing it part time after he was born. So that was 1994. And back then, the concept of a woman working part time was very different than it is now. So basically, they were paying me for 3 days, but making me come in 5 days. There was obviously no remote work. And it was frustrating. And I was getting less interesting work because I wasn't there as much and able to go to court as much. So I stopped working. I had my son, who is 28, and I was not working for almost a year, not even full year, when I just realized that it was not great for me being home full time. I was annoyed that my now ex-husband was asking me how much I had spent at the pharmacy that day and bugging me about, any money I spend, and that wasn't working well for me. So we had just bought an apartment and I was kind of curious about it. And in New York, you're automatically licensed as a broker if you're a lawyer, because what you learn in property law is, I guess, about what you learn in that course. So I walked into a Corcoran office on Broadway near where I lived, and I said, "Hi, I'm a lawyer and I want to do this part time." And they said, "You're hired." So I entered that training program that I referred to before, where I get yelled at, and I started. And I started the old fashioned way. Back then, you didn't really join teams. There weren't so many teams. We didn't have the internet. So we had something called floor duty. It was a storefront
Sure.
office, which is where I walked into it. And I sat in the front, and I sat there on the weekends, and people came in looking for a broker. So one woman came in, she was getting divorced and she was looking for a rental. And one couple came in, they were moving downtown and they wanted to sell their one bedroom on the Upper West Side. So those were my two first pieces of business. And then I was at a fundraiser a few weeks after that, and I met this couple, and they said that maybe they'd buy an apartment in Manhattan. They weren't sure. They lived in Westchester, and I said, "Oh, I'd love to show you apartments." They said, "Well, we don't want to promise you. We may end up wasting your time." I said, "It's fine. I'm new. Let me learn. I'd love to show you properties." And they did buy something. Back then, it was $1.6 million. It was a ton of money back then. It was 1998. And from there, my business grew. And that's how I got into it. So I stayed at Corcoran until March of 2005. And then I left and I came to Brown Harris, where I've been for 20 years.
Amazing. Uh, I'm amazed that people go all the way through law school, pass the board, and pass the bar, and then sometimes go, I think I want to try something else because law school is misery and passing the bar is misery. And you did it, and then found a different calling. And you were a litigator. You did fun stuff, and still, yeah, I love that. you were able to make that transition. My girlfriend, who's a litigator as well, she and she's passed actually. She did the bar in 2 states, so she had double the fun.
Yeah,
And
so did I.
now,
I also had my bar in Connecticut. Mhm,
oh, gotcha. So you know how much fun that is. And so
mhm,
even today, she loves what she does. She's like, if I had to do it all over again, I don't know. I don't know if it's as much as she loves it. She's like, I don't know if all the pain and suffering was worth it. But I love the fact that you have transitioned in really just blossomed into, again, a career that most anyone can start really. The barrier to entry is very low, and yes, a lot of attorneys end up getting their license. In Illinois, we have a similar structure where you
mhm.
still have to take the test, but it's not certainly not as difficult as passing the bar. So a lot of attorneys get their license just because, and they
Right,
end up doing real
right.
estate as well. But very few are like, I'm going to hang up my law degree and end up doing this full time. So we know you made the switch. It seemed like it was a good fit. We've heard about how you received your first 2 clients, and yeah, the times have obviously changed. Although maybe in Manhattan not as much, because of course people are still walking around and walking into shops and businesses. So, but the rest of us who don't get walk-in traffic obviously are building our businesses in different ways. And were you born and raised in New York as well, or did you come from somewhere
No,
else?
so I grew up in New Haven, which isn't so far away, but I was not a New Yorker. I mean, my connections were mainly that I had gone to college at the University of Pennsylvania, so I knew people who had moved to New York. I went to law school in New York City. Um, but, I would say that being a lawyer and having gone to Penn probably was helpful to me. But I built my business sort of the old-fashioned way, where so I had these three first pieces of business: a rental for $7,000, a one-bedroom for $800,000, and a two-bedroom or a three-bedroom for $1,600,000. And I started just working, and one thing fed into another. And back then, people couldn't look you up on the web. So I got some repeat business right away, word of mouth a little bit. I did floor duty. I did open houses. I just met people. I mean, one of my biggest clients to this day is somebody that I met in an open house. I had a listing and I did an open house on Sunday, and somebody came in. They didn't want to buy that property, but they ended up working with me and over the time referred me business. I mean, I got a lot of business that way. Nowadays I get a lot of business because people find me on the web, but I still have a lot of repeat business. I mean, I've been doing this long enough that I have now people who are buying their third property from me, each time it's bigger, right? Um, and I think that when people think about growing their business, I think sometimes people are too anxious to say, well, how do you sell the $10 million properties? And it doesn't really work that way. You have to. It's stepping stones and it's building blocks, and you have to think about the $10 million client and think to
Yeah,
yourself, would a $10 million client want to give a newbie their business? Probably not. That doesn't
probably
really
not.
make a lot of sense. So when people say to me, well, how did you break into the upper echelons of the price points? I tell them it's with experience, right? It's
Yeah,
with a lot of hard work. And if you would look at my career over the last 27 years, there's been a trajectory of slow and steady every year. The average price point has gone up. But importantly, you have to still maintain your business on lower price points because you have to service other people connected to the higher price points.
sure.
And the other thing that I've learned, which has been really important in any economy, is that times change, right? So after 9/11, we had a few dead months and things went crazy. After the financial crisis, there were 2 years that nothing sold. So I did rentals because I needed to pay my bills.
Yeah.
And during COVID, I also did rentals. And so I would say that, I once saw this TED talk by this woman, I can't think of her name, but she talked about who's successful, right? Is it the smartest? Is it the most connected? Whatever. And one of the things that determines whether people are going to be successful is how scrappy they are, right? How hard they work, how hungry they are. And I would describe myself as being intelligent, all those other things, but I'm scrappy. I do work that's in front of me, and if things change, I change with it.
Yeah. Pivoting. You're talking about being
Right, right,
flexible,
right.
malleable. I mean, look, you started in a completely different career that doesn't easily lend itself to switching, right? You went through a lot of sweat equity to get that law degree and then basically said I'm completely changing because I have faith I could do this other thing. And then you did because and maybe even going through law school, getting to law school, going through it, passing the bar in 2 states, maybe that also gave you a sense of like, I can kind of, maybe not everything, I can't do everything, but I could do a lot. And it probably gave you this idea that if I had to start all over and do something else, I could, and you did. And I think that is, really amazing that you did. I imagine if you could go back and change it, you wouldn't probably change anything. You just, ended up all working out just perfectly. I want to know, and this is often a question we get from our listeners about top agents as they go, what do they do every day, right? And of course, every day is different, and you're running around, replying to clients, handling your existing relationships, and obviously looking for new business too. But do you have a regular sort of flow to your day? Obviously knowing that things change, but are there some daily habits that you still employ today that maybe you even started doing 20 years ago?
Yeah, I don't know that I have kind of a checklist of things that I've been doing for many years, but I would say that, if you look at most successful people, they get up pretty early in the morning and they get going pretty quickly. So I get up early, I drink my coffee in the kitchen, and I check emails. And if I know that somebody's around to talk and they need to talk, I might call them at 7:30 in the morning if I know that person likes to talk early. So I would say that I get a lot of work done pretty early via email. I will often send emails to my team members saying, let's make sure to do this, let's make sure to do that. A lot of the thoughts I have that I put down in an email in the morning, I have thought about before I went to bed, I'll be honest. Sometimes before I've gotten out of bed. Um, I, most mornings for me start out with a workout. That's like really important part of my day. I've been doing that since probably senior year of college. It
Wow.
puts order into my day, gives me energy. I think I have a lot of like nervous energy and some anxiety, like a lot of people do. And that is the best thing for me to release that anxiety to make me feel better and clear headed. So that would be what I would say. The three things that are sort of happen every day is drinking coffee, checking email, organizing my day, and working out. The rest can go in many different directions. The rest of the day, and one of the things I love about my job is that no days look exactly alike. Like today, I've actually been in the office a lot, which is great because it's 100 degrees here in New York. So I haven't minded at all. But I didn't have that many appointments because people canceled because of the heat. So I've been doing a lot of catching up on things that I had to do, board that I'm on, just checking things that I sometimes don't have a chance to check at the office. But my day consists of speaking to clients, both buyers and sellers, checking new listings, checking my listings to make sure that they're looking the best, thinking of ideas of how I can repackage them, remarket them, thinking about marketing ideas, and thinking about different kinds of outreach, and then also I read the paper every day. It's not always first thing in the morning, but I do read the paper every day. Nowadays we all get a lot of news within our email. If it's something that I enjoy reading or I find relevant, I'll read those emails. Other ones I delete. I try to stay really focused on work and tasks at hand during the day. I think people of my generation, I'm 60 years old, are probably a little bit better at that than some of the younger generation. I'm just never on Instagram or Facebook during the day. It's not my habit, it's not my interest. To me, I would find it disruptive. The people who work for me mainly are under 30 or 31. And I have one person who is older than 40 and one person who's my age. I don't find that they have that issue, but the younger people I often will see that are on social media during the day. And I actually I did a test for them, like a challenge a few months ago. I said anybody who can stay off of social media for 5 days in a row gets a $1,500 bonus at the end of the 5 days. But if you make it 2 days and then you go on, oh, this is between 9 and 5. If you break it, the 5 days starts again. And the feedback was amazing. I mean, one of my teammates said to me, I actually was less depressed. I felt better when I wasn't
Yeah,
on it during the day. So I think they learned something about themselves. So I think that that's probably a little bit of advice that I'll throw out there to people.
yeah.
We all multitask. That's the way the world is. But the fact is we can't multitask that well.
Absolutely. The data is clear. We can't really multitask at all, right? Very few of us are able to be effective in that way. And to talk about social media for a second, because we don't really talk about it all that much on our show, other than how to be successful using social media. But when we talk about being successful, we're talking about how to actually interact with your sphere on social media. And if you're doing that and you're really trying to deepen relationships, great. That's a good use of your time in social media. But if you're going there to consume content, Lisa's really talking about, then how useful is that? And yeah, I am so grateful, I'm sure you are as well, that you and I did not grow up with social media, so we don't really have those habits. And I really feel for the younger people who grew up with it, because how could you not be addicted to it if you've been on it since you were 10 years old or even younger? It's, of course, people are addicted. And I think that's a great point. So you know and you're right too. The other thing I find when I do go on social media, which is very rare, is I don't feel as good about myself. I look at things I don't have. I look at people on vacations that I'm not at. I look at people further along in life, at least according to the picture I'm seeing. Maybe they're not actually, but it looks like they're further along, and I feel less than. And I don't know how anybody doesn't feel that way. They're at dinners I'm not at, and it really does. It's hard to maintain my own sense of like, I'm doing great when I see everybody posting their best selves over and over and over again. Nobody's posting, the arguments and the fights and the mistakes and the failures. And of course, that's really more of what normal life is like anyway. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think if you find yourself consuming social media daily and you don't find that it's helpful, if it's a few minutes here and there, fine. But if it's taking away time from things that you want to do, then try to stretch a bit and feel the anxiety that maybe you would feel, that social media would sort of soothe you from, and learn how to cope with that anxiety. Or maybe go work out. I do the same thing. I work out, not every day, but I work out 3 days a week. And I didn't realize how much nervous energy I had, like you were saying, before I started exercising. And I don't like to exercise. It's not something I would choose to do, but it is a really good idea for me. And as much as I hate to do push-ups and pull-ups and wall sits and all the awful things you have to do in the gym, it's a really good idea. And so I try to do things that are good ideas. And so, Lisa, thank you for all of that. I want to ask you a little bit about sort of process. And so a couple of things that I think is always interesting. So a lot of times agents who aren't playing in the luxury space yet think, well, if I just had that $10 million listing, boy, all my problems would be solved. It's kind of like if I just won the lottery, all my problems would be solved. It's like, I don't know. I don't know that that's true, because there's a whole host of challenges that come with listing luxury properties. Number one, not that many people are walking around that can afford to buy a $10,000 property. So if you're representing the seller, you might get lucky and someone sees it and then just buys. But a lot of times you have to go out and source the buyers yourself, or you have to network with those other agents who play in that space as well. So it really brings on a different type of challenge. So can you speak a little bit to that how is luxury different from the non-luxury market?
Well, it's a little bit hard to describe. And I think that because I came to this sort of organically and slowly, so I started in this business when I was 34 and 34, 33, and now I'm 60. I've sort of had this natural progression where I started with smaller listings and have gotten to larger listings. So now I'm sort of like the old woman in the office with all of the knowledge and all of this experience, and it feels comfortable for me. But I will say that every time I sort of jumped and got that next bigger listing, it felt it was I was nervous. It felt like a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think what you have to do is you have to lean into it. You have to lean into the fact that it's a new challenge for you, and you really have to study how you're going to market or deal with somebody who's at a higher price point, and make sure that you know all of the competition that's at that price point, whether you're working with a buyer at that price point or a seller. Make sure you know what else is out there. That's super important. You want to make sure that everything you're doing is appropriate for that property. Now, some of these things I'm going to mention seem really stupid, but if you're showing a $10 million property in a fancy neighborhood, I don't think you should show up in your gym clothes. Now, I don't think you should show up in your gym clothes to show anything, but that's probably the 60-year-old lawyer in me speaking. Um, but I do think that there's a level of sophistication
Sure.
that comes with a different price point. So, for instance, in my office, I have a rule that the guys should wear, um, work shirts. And if we have an important meeting, they should wear a jacket. We've given up on the ties. Um, but, no jeans, no shorts. And that's because we're working at a certain level that I think that that's super important. I also have rules like no being on your phone while you're showing a property. Now,
It's-
should you not do that when you're showing a $500,000 studio apartment? You shouldn't, but certainly not if you're showing a $10 million property. And I think that all those things make a big difference. And I'll just tell you briefly that I took over the last 5 listings at a new building on the Upper East Side from a different agency. And I sold the 3 largest ones with a contract out on the fourth largest one within 2 months. And they hadn't been able to sell them in a really, really long time. One of the reasons why is that I think that I was able to work with the buyer pool better because I understood the buyer pool. These were all over $11 million. And we presented our marketing and our salesmanship in a very high end, sophisticated way.
yeah.
But, that's come with hard work.
Yeah, I like that you spoke about sort of the aesthetic piece because, of course, knowledge, experience, presentation, all of that is so important. But you do also have to consider how you appear physically, right? And so you're talking about showing up well dressed, showing up in a professional manner. Attorneys are kind of the last group that is still holding on to the suits, and I kind of like it. And in fact, my girlfriend has a fantasy that in the future that in courts they could all wear robes so they would be all equal, but she's like that'll probably never happen. But she has to wear the fancy business suits as well. But it is something that I always kind of look at things in life. I don't know if you feel the same way. This what's the downside, right? So I look at things like I go, well, if I go to the gym, what's the downside? Well, a little bit of time. I'm not going to want to do it. It hurts. It's like super uncomfortable and it's painful, but that's it. That's really it. And then there's like a million upsides. If I volunteer somewhere, what's the downside? A little bit of time and I get all these, benefits. If I follow up with my clients, if I dress well, if I pay attention to, somebody during a listing instead of being on my phone, what's the downside? Maybe I miss out on a couple of Instagram posts, right? Who cares? And so I love that you sort of are intentional about the way you present yourself because it is really important. I don't want to go out with a professional who's distracted. I want to go out with a professional that looks professional. And again, nobody really wants to put on suits and ties, and we don't want to do that, but oh well, it's going to most likely project an image that is, of course, something that people will think, wow, this person at least takes their job seriously. And so I agree that of course you have to be really good at your job too, but making sure that the whole package is really well presented is so important. I have a question about communication. So I am always curious when, whether it's a luxury client or not, I'm sure you treat all your clients the same. Of course you do. How often are you communicating? Let's talk about listings. So you have sellers and whether the home is, having eyeballs on it or people walking in and checking it out or not. How often are you communicating with these sellers to sort of give them updates? Do you have a process for that? Do you sort of do it on intuition, or how does that work?
It's a combination of both. So I do have a process. I try to send reports to all of my sellers every 2 to 3 weeks maximum. And that's a formal report that goes through how many times we've shown the property, how many times we've had repeat viewings, all of the advertising that we've done, and then click through links showing where their apartment or property is featured so that they have it all in front of them. Um, then I also try to, depending on the person, I try to give feedback after I show their property. If it's a property you're showing a ton, sometimes that's hard to do. But I do try, especially, nowadays, it takes 2 seconds to write a text or an email to somebody. I really do try to give feedback after I've shown the property, even if it's just 2 lines. That was a good showing, or that showing didn't seem that promising, or whatever. Sometimes you don't always have feedback right away. And I'm sure that I have clients who feel that I'm not in touch with them as much. I'm sure that I have clients who feel that I'm in touch with them plenty. But I do try to communicate as much as possible. And like I said, it's somewhat organic. It's somewhat sort of just based on the situation. There is a process that we have also, and I do think being in communication with your clients is incredibly important.
Yeah, I also want to switch over to buyers for a second because
Mhm.
right now, rates are certainly higher than anyone would really prefer. They're not
Mhm.
traditionally all that high, but certainly as compared to the three
Right.
percent days of before. And oh boy, it's funny. It was such a great thing for all of us that owned or bought during that time. But then it's also this sort of we're like handcuffed now to our properties, and it's not the most painless experience to go from 3% to 7% these days. I'm gonna have to make that I'm gonna have to do that myself here in the next year, and it'll be fine. But it's certainly, I understand why a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines. But when we talk about buyers, I just want to talk about one thing in particular, because I always find that really successful agents do this a little differently than others. And I'm sure you see, as a person who has a lot of listings, you probably see the full gamut of experience. I'm talking about presenting offers. So offers are typically sent via email. There's an email that's sent. There's an attachment that's usually sent there. There's maybe text in the email, maybe not. And maybe there's a phone call that follows up with it. Maybe there's a text that follows up with it, maybe not. I just want to hear from you is, what do you think are best practices when submitting an offer, whether it's a competitive environment or not?
I always like to call the other agent and tell them I'm going to be submitting an offer. And then when I submit an offer, I do it by email. I CC myself. I put in the first line, the subject line, offer on the property so that they see it. It's visible in their inbox right away. In New York, again, we have a lot of co-ops, so the people's financials are important. But even if it's not a co-op, I think it's important to attach a financial statement or some financial information about the buyer. And then in the body of the offer, I like to put a little bit of information about the people, what they do, where they live, if they have kids, if they have a dog, if they've owned before, those kinds of things. And then I usually follow up to make sure that they've gotten the offer. So I think presentation, communication is super important. And remember that a desperate seller will kind of hang on to any offer they get, but a seller who has a few different offers, you can really distinguish yourself by making the offer seem more serious and more viable, even if it's not the top offer. I mean, I will tell you that I'm now marketing a property for $2 million, and we had 3 different offers, and they were all around the same price. But one of them came in and just was much more professionally presented than the others, and that was
Yeah.
impressive.
So will you create like a title page, or a page that sort of lists the bullet points before you actually get into the meat of the contract? Like, here are the main points, or because it sounds like you sort of do a version of that in the offer.
I do it. I mean, I don't do it with bullet points, but I have sort of a format in my head,
Yeah.
thank you for showing it to us. Appreciate your time. That's the first paragraph. On behalf of my client, pleased to present this offer. It's cash, it's contingent on financing, it's not contingent on financing. I give them some information about them. I follow, and then the next paragraph will be a little bit more information. And then I also will always say, and next to this email is their pre approval, their financial statement, whatever else you need as backup.
Yeah. I love that. And again, to you, this is like, of course you should do it exactly this way. I imagine you see, and again, maybe in the luxury space, you see less of this, but certainly in the non-luxury space, you will see all sorts of offers coming in, sort of, haggard offers, hastily written, maybe uh, no sort of data points put in there, maybe nothing in the email at all other than the actual PDF that's in there. And it is amazing. I'm curious, how often when you have a listing does the agent present the offer via email, or follows it up with a phone call, or starts with a phone call, sends a text, how often do you receive things in a way that you think that's a really, well, you just talked about the listing that you have now, that 3 of them, you said one of them really looked good. How often do you receive them in a way where you're like, that person did a good job?
Um, I would say that 85% of the time I do. I think
Yeah.
that has to do with the fact that we have so many co-ops, and that I'm also playing in a pretty
Yeah.
high end of the market. So most of the brokers have some experience. But as you mentioned earlier on, the barrier to entry is very low in this job. Um, and that doesn't mean that you have to have like that you're necessarily better at this if you have a law degree than if you don't. But we're dealing with a lot of money, right? We're dealing with expensive properties in New York City. Whatever property price point you're at, 500,000, 15 million, right? It's all expensive. And it's a lot of money to whomever is working with you. So if you want to do well, whether you have a college degree or not, educate yourself in what you're doing so that you present yourself in a very sophisticated
Yeah.
and knowledgeable way. Because some of the most successful brokers I know are not people that have business degrees from Harvard.
Sure.
And some of the least successful brokers are ones that do have business degrees from HBS. And I think to myself, oh my God, like what happened?
Yeah.
Um, so, you can make yourself into a successful person by training yourself and learning your craft.
Yeah, obviously I agree. That is really great advice. I want to talk about in between sales. So you have the transaction, you do a great job, it closes, everyone's happy, and now it's a 7-year window before maybe the next transaction. What are you doing in those 7 years to stay at least in touch with those clients? Like, what does that look like?
Well, so I always send a gift to somebody after they close. I try to think of something that they will enjoy. Lately, I've been doing a lot of like donations in someone's honor because I feel like a lot of my wealthy clients sort of have everything they need, and buying them a gift that they have to put on a shelf or wine that they don't drink is like not necessary. So I'll find out like a charity that they're involved in. Then I send a Christmas card every year, holiday card, I should say. For years, I did the Zagat restaurant guide,
Yeah.
and then they stopped printing them, and people stopped, carrying around books. Anyway, everything was online. So now I get a holiday card from a charity. I've done uh, Share Our Strength, No Kid Left Behind, like hungry, for hungry children. I've done Habitat for Humanity, and it's a card, a holiday card that says that a donation has been made in the person's honor. And my list grows every year. I mean, I have, probably 1,000 people on my list at this point. I spend, $10,000
Wow.
towards the charity. But people appreciate it. People really appreciate it. I often get notes back, thanks for the donation in my honor. And I think it means something to people.
I'm going to pause right there because you were the first person in 700 episodes to ever share that specific type of holiday card. So we all send holiday cards, or a lot of us do.
Mhm.
And, some of them are handwritten, some of them aren't. And, holiday cards are kind of like, yeah, it's okay. It's great. But, a lot of people do it. But you're doing something a little different and something that is more impactful and something that really touches people, which is I'm putting money back into this organization that I think is important. I'm doing it in your name. And, that is, I'm trying to think, have I ever received a card where somebody made a donation? I mean, you'll see this sometimes when people pass away, you'll see
Mhm.
donations made in someone's honor to a particular type of organization that supports, some sort of disease or condition, but you don't typically see it outside of that. And so I love that you do that. It's sort of, I think our audience could blitz past that without realizing the significance. Everybody wants to feel like they can contribute. And a lot of people are so busy and they don't do as much volunteer work, or they don't donate as much as they probably would like to. And so any little thing like that that gets them a little closer to that experience is certainly going to have a positive effect. And I know you're not doing it to get business, you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and you feel that it's important to you. And it's also something that really differentiates you from all the other agents who send, a handwritten card, which is, again, that's great too. And I guess you're doing a version of that as well. But the donation, I think, is a really nice touch, and certainly is you going above and beyond to say, "Hey, I'm doing this, after the sale with you, and we're still a team, basically."
Right. Well, the this the CEO of our company is a woman named Bess Friedman, and one of the things that she always talks about is that this is a people business, right? And she's somebody who's very conscious of needy people and the world that we live in. And I grew up in a family where giving back was very important. And so if you look at my Instagram too, like I definitely show some of my properties. Um, I don't brag about where I go on vacation. Once in a while, I may show a picture of me and my kids saying, this was a fun Christmas to be with my kids. I'm so happy. But that's kind of like a rare, few and far between. I try to put messages in my Instagram post. I might show pretty nature and mention, save the planet, appreciate the nature, appreciate your neighbor. It's all sort of the same concept. Like all of us, the way all of us live, everybody listening to this, we're all lucky, right? We all have
So
enough to
lucky.
eat. We all have a decent place to live. We're all getting to enjoy a job in a free world, a free country. We can complain about a lot of things. We're all really lucky. And I don't take any of that for granted. So I feel like we all need to give back, because if everybody gave back, we could make the world a better place. And that's just something I really stick to and I really believe in. And going back to this being a people person, like, you know, I like to work with people who understand that, and
Yeah.
hopefully people like to work with me because that's important to me.
Yeah.
So it goes back to being true to who you are, right? I mean, I'm giving advice on working hard and being professional and being present and being respectful, but be who you are. Don't be afraid to be who you are.
Yep. And this idea of, again, what's the downside? So you should, if you're not currently contributing in a way that's meaningful to you with an organization, really consider doing that. What are you passionate about? And start thinking about how you can volunteer time or money. With those organizations, because number one, it's going to make you feel better, and it's a nice thing to do outside of the grind of this job. Also, it's going to, certainly not going to look unfavorable to your clients. Not that you would be bragging about, I do this volunteer work, but to let people know that you support certain organizations, that is a very powerful thing, because people respond very favorably, of course, to people that contribute. And so it's what's the downside? A little bit of time, a little bit of money, but you get to feel great regardless, and people respond well, and you're doing good in the world. So I'm a huge fan of that. I wish I would have learned that lesson sooner in life. I've been contributing probably for about 20 plus years, but I wish I would have started in my early 20s. I was a little maybe more self-absorbed at that time and didn't realize how much I could give. But it really is a great suggestion, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And want to talk and also too, I like that you are not posting on social media about all of your major, sort of personal successes. Like here I am on this wonderful vacation, because at the end of the day, I mean, maybe friends and family kind of would like to see, pictures of you, and you can send those to people privately, of course. But I always do get a little, I don't want to, I was just in Seattle with my girlfriend for the weekend. We were just there just to sort of enjoy Seattle. And we were there last weekend. And I was thinking of posting, and then I go, if I post a bunch of pictures of us doing Seattle stuff, that's cute and whatever, it's fine. But am I really just kind of showing off a little bit? Like, look at me, I was in Seattle. And like, what is my intention here? Like, I already sent them to my friends and family privately. And do I need the world to know that I went to Seattle? Like, who cares? And so I sort of am with you there, as I don't, I think we tend to want to, I guess the point is, think about what's the intention, right? What's the intention of this post? Is it to boost my ego? Is it to get people to think I'm this really amazing, cool thing? Or is it in a way that's, contributing to something? And I think, yeah, the world would be a lot better if we thought about how do we contribute versus how do we impress. So I appreciate you doing that. Lisa, I want to finish with just a piece of advice. So you work with a lot of agents. You've seen agents come and go. You've seen agents succeed, others not succeed. And a lot of agents right now are struggling because the market's not in its most perfect state, of course. And agents are suffering right now. So for anyone out there that's just needs a little boost, what would you suggest that they should do if they aren't flush with clients right now?
So, a few years ago, the guy who manages my office, who's been my manager for many years, and he's now actually a co-president of the company, Kevin Koveski, um, said to me that there was a friend of mine who was working here, and she had complained to him that she wasn't busy enough. And so he said to her, "How many doors do you walk through a week?" And it was a soft period. It might have been like after the financial crisis, you know. And she said, "I don't know. I don't know what you mean." And he said, "How many doors do you walk through?" And he said, "For instance, I bet if I would look at Lisa's week, she probably walks through 50 doors a week." And so that's my advice. All of us have gone through slower times. So what do? Don't sit at home waiting for the phone to ring. Just like when you were a teenager or in college, your mother told you not to sit at home and wait for the boy to call you, the girl to call you, right? Go out with your friends, do something, be busy, right? That's not going to make the phone ring. And it's the same thing. If you sit at your desk, the phone's not going to ring quicker. Go walk through doors. Go to open houses. Preview properties that are being shown. Walk through doors, because you never know when you're going to be sitting next to somebody on the subway, in a restaurant, in a sauna, wherever. And somebody says, "Oh, yeah, I've been looking. Oh, you're a broker. I've been looking for a two-bedroom and I really want to have a swimming pool." And you may be able to say, "Oh my God, that's so interesting. Yesterday I went and saw this great apartment in a building that has a swimming pool." And I have gotten business that way because I put myself out there looking at things. And you know life is all about opportunities, right? The more opportunities we make for ourselves, the more they come together. The more people you know, the more people you meet. The more people you know, the more stories you know. So you have to put yourself out there. Go through doors, walk through doors. If you're a new agent, ask a busy broker in your office if you can help at an open house.
Yes.
Be the greeter in a brownstone where there's no doorman. In New York, we have lots of doormen, but we also have buildings where you have to like be there when somebody needs to go up to the walk up, or put yourself out there. That is how you are going to make opportunities for yourself. They don't just come and fall on our laps. We have to keep looking for
Yeah, I wish they would fall at my lap, but they
them.
haven't. Just hasn't happened for me yet. So
Walk
I'm
through
with
more
you.
doors.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Lisa K. Lippman is our guest today. I want everybody to follow Lisa. She is the number one agent with Brown Harris Stevens for 9 consecutive years in one of the toughest markets in the country, New York City. She's crushing it. She is doing everything that she can do to maintain this amazing level of production. She does $300 million a year, guys. Impressive. And she's wonderfully sweet. She gave us an hour of her time. She doesn't have an hour of her time to give to us, and yet she did. So we're super grateful to you on behalf of our audience, Lisa. Thank you for spending time with us, sharing your wisdom, sharing your knowledge and strategies. Our audience super appreciates you. And on behalf of Lisa and myself, we appreciate the audience. You guys are the reason we do the show. So the best way you can help us is, if this helped you, and I know it did, tell a friend. Think of another real estate agent in your office and pass them over this episode, and let them know that we do episodes 2 to 3 times a week. We've done 700 episodes plus. I don't even know what the number is anymore. Lots of episodes you can go back and watch or listen to, and hit that subscribe button. We appreciate it. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show. That helps us out as well. All right. And I want everybody to follow Lisa on Instagram, Lisa K. Lippman on Instagram. We will have a link to that in the show notes. Check out some of her listings. They are pretty impressive. And by the way, if you have clients that are coming in and out of Manhattan, guess who you should connect with? Lisa K. Lippman. She would love to chat with you if you have, clients from other markets that are moving to and from. She has clients also that move to and from New York City. So if you want to develop that relationship, you can reach out to her that way. You can find her. She's easy to find online. Just Google her or connect with her on Instagram as well. All right, Lisa, thank you so much. We will see everybody on the next episode.
Thanks, DJ.